When my mom told me, flights are $1,200 each, and if you can't pay, you stay home, I nodded like it didn't matter. But inside, I made a silent promise. She thought she could freeze me out of the family trip because I wasn't as rich as her new husband's kids, but what she didn't know was that I was already sitting on a way to turn the tables, so hard she'd wish she never spoke those words that I didn't even get an invitation until 2 weeks before the trip. My mom's voice was cheerful on the phone, like we'd been close all these years, even though the last time I'd seen her was at my dad's funeral. "We're going to Italy this summer," she said like it was a generous offer. Then came the condition: flights were $1,200 each, and if I couldn't pay, I could just stay home. There was no, "I'll help you out," or "we'll cover it as a gift." It was blunt, transactional, and laced with that same coldness I'd known growing up after she remarried. My stepbrothers would get their tickets bought for them. I was different, I was optional. I told her I'd think about it. What I really meant was, I'd think about how to use this. Growing up, my mom had always made it clear who her priority was. Once she married Jim, his kids became the golden boys. They got private school, new cars, lavish birthdays. I got hand-me-downs and, "be grateful you have a roof over your head." I'd never forgotten that imbalance, and hearing it again in her voice made old memories sting. But this time, I wasn't a powerless teenager. I had a career, my own apartment, and, thanks to a recent promotion, a lot more leverage than she knew. I didn't mention to her that my company had a European branch in Rome. I also didn't mention that I had already been offered a short-term transfer there for the summer, flights and lodging covered by my employer. The irony hit me like a punchline. Could literally be in Italy for free, in better accommodations, at the exact same time as their trip. I could run into them accidentally, dressed better, eating better, staying better, without spending a dime. The thought was delicious. When I told my mom I couldn't afford it and would just stay home, her voice almost had relief in it. She moved on quickly, talking about how amazing the trip would be for the family, meaning everyone except me. That was the moment I decided I wouldn't just run into them, I'd make sure the timing made a point. I emailed my HR department that afternoon, confirmed the dates, and booked my work flight for the same week they'd be there. It wasn't enough just to show up. I wanted it to sting. My mom had always been obsessed with appearances. She loved posting family photos online, bragging about her perfect vacations. The truth was, those perfect moments always had someone missing, me. I planned to fix that in the most public way possible. I reached out to a friend who worked as a travel influencer in Europe, someone with a massive following. We agreed to meet in Rome and take some high-quality photos at the exact landmarks my mom's itinerary covered. If my mom wanted the world to see her curated family, she was about to see me outshine them in every shot, without her. In the 2 weeks leading up to the trip, I played the role perfectly. I told my mom I hoped she had fun, that maybe next time I could join. I even liked her posts about shopping for luggage and new outfits. Meanwhile, I was coordinating with my influencer friend, arranging dinner reservations at the same restaurants she bragged about booking, only for better tables. I had no intention of hiding from her, I just wanted the reveal to be timed perfectly. When my plane landed in Rome, I walked through the airport with my carry-on, a work laptop, and the kind of confidence that comes from knowing you're about to pull off the most satisfying move of your life. My company put me up in a suite with a balcony overlooking the city. From my window, I could see the cobblestone streets where they'd probably be walking later that week, snapping pictures like tourists. I unpacked, sent a few work emails, and then got ready for the first strike. The first day I spotted them was pure chance, or maybe fate had a sense of humor. I was in Piazza Navona with my friend, sipping espresso, when I saw my mom's wide-brimmed hat bobbing through the crowd. She was flanked by Jim and my 2 stepbrothers, all dressed in expensive vacation gear. My first instinct was to duck, but then I realized this was perfect. They hadn't seen me yet, and I had control over the moment. My friend grabbed her camera, and we started taking photos, laughing, clinking coffee cups, the city square behind us glowing in the afternoon sun. Right as my mom turned to look in our direction, I leaned in to say something to my friend, making sure she caught the light just right. My mom froze mid-step. I could see her mouth form my name, but I didn't wave. I just smiled politely and went back to my coffee, like running into her in Rome was the most normal thing in the world. The look on her face was worth every ounce of restraint I'd shown over the years. That night, I posted a few of the photos on social media. The captions were simple: work trip perks, living la dolce vita, best table in Rome. Within hours, mutual friends and extended family were liking and commenting. The timing was perfect. My mom had just posted a group shot from the same square, but mine looked effortlessly better. I wasn't trying to be petty in the captions, but the contrast was impossible to miss. The next few days became a silent game of one-upmanship. If she posted a picture at the Trevi Fountain, I'd post one from the same spot later that evening, framed better, with gelato in hand. If she bragged about dining at a certain restaurant, I'd post a picture from there too, but with the chef in the frame, smiling next to me. It wasn't about competing for strangers' approval, it was about making her realize I didn't need her invitation or her approval to live fully. On the third day, we ended up on the same guided tour of the Colosseum. I swear the universe was in on it at this point. She was clearly surprised to see me again, and this time Jim gave me a curt nod, like he was trying to figure out why I was there. I explained casually that I was in Rome for work, that my company had flown me out. I could see the flicker in my mom's eyes when she realized I'd paid nothing for the trip she'd made sound unattainable. By then, the narrative online had shifted. Relatives were commenting things like, "So glad you finally got a vacation," and "Looks like you're having the time of your life," under my posts, sometimes tagging my mom without realizing the tension. She hated being outshone, especially when it came to the image of a united, happy family. But the real payoff came when one of my stepbrothers, who had always parroted her favoritism, sent me a message. "Did you seriously get flown out here for free?" he wrote. I replied with nothing but a smiling emoji. That was the moment I knew the message had landed, not just with my mom, but with everyone who'd watched her treat me like I was on the outside. By the fourth day, the tension was thick enough to taste. Every time we crossed paths, my mom tried to act cordial, but the smile never quite reached her eyes. I could tell she was running through the math in her head, how I could be in all these places, dressed well, clearly enjoying myself, without having paid the $1,200 she'd thrown at me like an ultimatum. And I never gave her the satisfaction of explaining. Every conversation was light, polite, and short, like I had somewhere better to be, which I always did. What she didn't know was that my influencer friend had been tagging me in posts that reached hundreds of thousands of viewers, and in a few of them, she'd even written captions about meeting up with my friend who's here on a fully paid work trip. It wasn't petty, it was strategic. The comments poured in about how amazing it was that my job valued me enough to send me to Europe, and a few people even asked if I'd run into my family while here. I didn't answer those questions. Silence was louder. Halfway through the week, I got an invitation from a client to join them for dinner at a Michelin-starred restaurant. It was the kind of place you booked months in advance. When I walked in, who was already seated at a table in the corner? My mom, Jim, and the Golden Boys. I don't know if she saw me first or if the maitre d' announcing my name caught her attention, but her head snapped up. I smiled warmly, shook the client's hand, and we were led to the chef's table, front row to the kitchen, complimentary champagne already waiting. I could feel her watching as the staff treated us like royalty, describing each dish in detail, bringing out special plates off menu. She'd mentioned on Facebook just days before that the restaurant was worth every penny, and that she'd finally gotten the reservation. Mine, of course, wasn't a reservation at all. It was a professional courtesy extended to my company's guests. And it wasn't costing me a cent. After dinner, I posted one photo, a shot of the chef and me, arms around each other, with the caption, "Business dinner to remember." I didn't tag the location. I didn't need to. Everyone who'd seen her post would know. The next morning, my mom called me. Not a casual, "How are you?" call, but one of those tense, clipped tone calls where you know there's an agenda. "You've been here this whole time and didn't tell me?" she asked, like she was the injured party. I reminded her, lightly, that she told me the trip was $1,200 and that if I couldn't afford it, I should stay home. "I figured you didn't want me tagging along," I said, keeping my voice neutral. She sputtered something about how it would have been nice to coordinate, but I could hear the bitterness under it. This wasn't about family bonding. This was about control, and she'd lost it. My stepbrothers were more transparent. One messaged me asking outright if my company was hiring. Another asked how I'd pulled off the entire trip. I gave vague answers. Let them wonder. Let them feel the gap between the way I'd been treated and the reality of my life now. I didn't need them to admit the favoritism, they already knew. By the end of the week, I'd managed to coincidentally end up in at least 5 of the same public places they visited, always looking like I was having the better time, always surrounded by interesting people. The photos kept coming. The comments kept flowing. And every time I glanced at my mom across a piazza or in a museum, I could see it, regret mixing with pride she didn't want to admit. The final blow wasn't something I planned, it was an opportunity that landed in my lap. My influencer friend got invited to a private after-hours tour of the Vatican museums. Only 20 people were allowed in, all of them either celebrities, diplomats, or high-profile business figures. She asked if I wanted to be her +1. I didn't even hesitate. When we arrived, the place was silent except for our small group. We wandered through the halls without crowds, hearing stories from the curator himself. At one point, I stood in the middle of the Sistine Chapel, no one else around me, just looking up at Michelangelo's ceiling in complete silence. It was surreal. My friend snapped a single, discreet photo, just me, from behind, framed against the masterpiece. She posted it later that night with the caption, "Once-in-a-lifetime moments." The next morning, my phone was blowing up. Cousins, old friends, even distant relatives I barely spoke to were messaging me. My mom had posted a group picture from their crowded daytime tour of the Vatican, hundreds of tourists in the background, everyone looking sweaty and tired. And right under her post, someone had commented, "Didn't my name just post a private tour there?" I didn't respond, but the thread took on a life of its own. People congratulating me, asking how I'd scored it, making lighthearted jokes about running into each other in Rome. My mom didn't delete the comments, but I could tell from the silence that she hated them. Our flights home were on the same day, though hers was mid-morning and mine was later. I saw them at the airport check-in counter, their bags piled high with souvenirs. She glanced at me, but there was no invitation to join them for coffee, no warm goodbye. Just a curt nod. I returned it with a smile. I wasn't angry anymore. I'd gotten what I came for, not revenge in the loud, dramatic sense, but the quiet, surgical kind that leaves the other person replaying it in their head for weeks. Back home, the trip faded from social media. My mom didn't post much afterward, and when she did, it was never as polished. She didn't brag about family vacations anymore. I didn't need her to. I'd proved something to myself, that her approval wasn't the measure of my worth. That I could stand in the same space, on the same continent, and not feel lesser. In fact, I'd outshone the very people she'd put above me my whole life, without ever raising my voice. A month later, I got an email from my stepbrother. He wanted to know if I'd be interested in helping him network to get a job at my company. I read it twice, laughed, and politely told him we weren't hiring in his field. The truth was, even if we were, I wouldn't have lifted a finger. Not because I wanted to punish him, but because I didn't owe him, or my mom, anything anymore. That trip wasn't just about being in Italy. It was about reclaiming the power I'd handed over years ago. Every espresso, every perfect photo, every casual, "oh, just here for work," was a reminder that I didn't need to fight for a place in her version of the family. I already had my own life, my own success, and my own people who valued me without conditions. In the end, she got her curated family vacation, and I got something far better, proof that the best revenge isn't about shouting from the rooftops. It's about living so well that the people who underestimated you can't help but notice. And judging by the way she'd looked at me across those cobblestone streets, I knew she noticed.